I walked into the bedroom and froze. The bed was unmade, the sheets crumpled as if someone had been sitting there moments ago. At first, it seemed like nothing unusual, until I noticed the faint imprint of a hand pressed into the pillow on my side of the bed. It wasn't mine. It was too small. Too delicate. I looked closer, the tension in my chest coiling like a spring. There was a faint, sweet smell in the air, perfume. Not hers. My eyes darted to her nightstand. A glass of water, condensation pooling at the base. It was still cold. Someone had been here, and recently. Diana? I called out, my voice tight, strained. No answer. The house was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner. I took a step back, nearly tripping over something on the floor. It was her favorite pair of heels, lying haphazardly near the door. One upright, the other on its side, as though she'd kicked them off in a hurry. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. The heel was scuffed, the tip scratched, almost like she'd been running. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to check my phone. But when I grabbed it, there were no messages, no missed calls. Just silence. Then, I noticed her laptop bag. It was propped against the wall, half open. A small detail, something I might have overlooked on any other day. But today, it felt off. Diana was obsessive about keeping her work things pristine. I crouched down, fingers trembling as I unzipped the bag. Inside, nestled among the usual tangle of chargers and notebooks, was her planner. I flipped it open to this week, scanning the pages for anything that might explain the suffocating knot in my stomach. And there it was. A single word scrawled across Thursday evening, Aiden. No context. No details. Just his name. Aiden. I slammed the planner shut, my chest heaving. I didn't recognize the name, but the way it was written, with a little heart doodled in the corner, told me all I needed to know. My mind raced as I pieced together the signs I'd been ignoring for months. The late nights at work. The way she'd stopped answering my calls after 10 p.m. The sudden, unexplained shopping trips where she'd come back with nothing. Before I could stop myself, I dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. My hand tightened around the phone, and I glanced back at the bed, the pillow with the handprint still mocking me. That's when I heard it, the faint vibration of her phone buzzing. Not in her purse. Not in the car. It was coming from the dresser drawer. I yanked it open, and there it was, her phone, screen lighting up with a name I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the message preview. Tonight was incredible. Same time next week. The sound of her phone buzzing again pulled me out of my daze. My hands moved on their own, snatching it from the drawer. The lock screen blinked to life, revealing the full message. Tonight was incredible. Same time next week. The name above it, Aiden. My heart pounded as if it were trying to escape my chest. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. The room spun, the walls closing in. My instincts told me to throw the phone across the room, to destroy it, to erase what I'd just seen. But I couldn't. I tapped the screen, and to my surprise, the phone opened. No password. No biometrics. She hadn't even bothered to lock it. A part of me hoped I was wrong, that I was misinterpreting everything. Maybe Aiden was just a coworker. Maybe this was some innocent joke, a misunderstanding that Diana would laugh off later. But the texts told a different story. There were dozens of messages, all from him. The tone was flirtatious at first, playful. Then it shifted. Intimate. Explicit. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the conversations. The worst part wasn't the words themselves, it was how casual they were. Like they'd been doing this for months, if not longer. You looked amazing in that dress tonight. Couldn't keep my hands off you. You really think he doesn't suspect anything? You're so good at this. Can't wait for next week. You free Tuesday or Thursday? I slammed the phone down on the dresser, my breathing ragged. My mind raced with images I didn't want to see, didn't want to believe. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? My knees buckled, and I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone as if it might come alive and confess everything. I tried to think logically, to pull myself out of the spiral of rage and betrayal threatening to consume me. I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. I picked up the phone again and went straight to her photo gallery. My chest tightened as I opened the first folder labeled Favorites. There they were. Pictures of Diana and Aiden, laughing, drinking, arms draped around each other like they didn't have a care in the world. A selfie of them in a car. A shot of her in the same red dress I'd noticed was missing from the closet, his hand resting possessively on her thigh. And then I saw the video. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. Just the thumbnail, her face, flushed and smiling, leaning into him, was enough to shatter whatever hope I had left. The sound of the front door opening made me jump. She was home. My mind split into two. One half screamed at me to confront her right now, to throw everything in her face and demand answers. The other half told me to wait, to stay calm, to plan my next move. I heard her heels clicking against the floor, the sound growing louder as she approached the bedroom. I shoved her phone back into the drawer and stood, trying to steady my breathing. When she walked in, she froze. Her hair was tousled, her makeup slightly smudged. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and something else, something that felt like guilt. "Hey," she said, her voice too casual, too controlled. "You're still up?" I stared at her, my fists clenched at my sides. "Where were you?" Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "Out with some friends. I told you I'd be late. You didn't tell me anything." My voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of every suspicion boiling inside me. She shrugged, brushing past me to the dresser. "I must have forgotten. It wasn't a big deal." I watched as she opened the drawer where I'd found her phone. For a moment, I thought she'd notice something was off, that she'd feel the shift in the air. But she didn't. She just grabbed a hair tie and turned back to me. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, her tone defensive now. I stepped closer, forcing her to meet my eyes. "Who's Aiden?" Her face paled. Just for a second, but I caught it. Then she laughed, a short, hollow sound. "Aiden? What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. I just watched her, waiting for the mask to slip. And when it did, it was spectacular. Her smile vanished, replaced by something sharper, darker. "You've been snooping, haven't you?" she accused, crossing her arms. "That's pathetic, Alex." My blood boiled. "Don't turn this around on me. I want the truth." She tilted her head, studying me like I was some inconvenient obstacle in her day. Then, with a smirk that sent a chill down my spine, she said, "Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need someone else to keep me entertained." It was like she'd slapped me, but her words cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't sorry. She didn't even care. I stood there, stunned into silence, her words echoing in my head like a mocking chorus. "Maybe if you weren't so boring." It wasn't just what she said, it was the venom in her voice, the smirk on her face. Diana wasn't ashamed. She wasn't remorseful. She was proud. "Wow," I finally managed, my voice cold and steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You're not even going to try to deny it." She rolled her eyes, brushing past me like I wasn't worth her time. "What's the point? You've already decided I'm guilty. Might as well save us both the drama." "Save us the drama?" I repeated, incredulous. "You think this is about drama? You've been sneaking around with someone else." "Oh, please," she snapped, spinning around to face me. "Don't act like you're some perfect saint. You've been coasting through this marriage for years, Alex. When's the last time you even tried to make me happy?" The audacity of her words left me speechless. I thought about every late night I'd stayed up helping her with work projects, every vacation I planned because she said she needed to get away, every fight I let go of to keep the peace. And now, here she was, rewriting history to justify her betrayal. "You're unbelievable," I said, shaking my head. "And you're predictable," she shot back. "This whole hurt husband routine. Spare me. If you want to leave, just do it. But don't stand there acting like you're some martyr." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman I married with the one standing in front of me now. But there was nothing left of the Diana I thought I knew. This person was a stranger, a cold, calculated stranger who didn't care how much damage she caused. For a moment, I considered walking out right then and there. But something stopped me. This wasn't over. Not yet. You're right, I said, my voice eerily calm. I've been predictable. But you're about to see a side of me you've never met. Her smirk faltered, just for a second. Oh, is that a threat? No, I said, stepping closer until I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. It's a promise. I left the room before she could respond, slamming the door behind me. My heart was racing, my mind already working overtime. This wasn't going to end with another argument, another stalemate where she walked away unscathed. If she wanted war, I'd give her one. But I wouldn't fight on her terms. I grabbed my laptop and headed to the kitchen, opening our shared financial accounts. My jaw tightened as I stared at the balances, each one filled with the money I'd worked so hard to save, money she'd dipped into more than once for her shopping sprees. She thought she could humiliate me, strip me of my dignity, and walk away like nothing happened. She thought she'd won. Not yet. With a few clicks, I transferred the bulk of our savings into a private account she couldn't access. Then I canceled the upcoming weekend trip she'd insisted we book, the one I now realized was probably just an excuse to spend more time with him. I deleted our dinner reservations, the couple's spa package, even the tickets to the concert she'd begged me to get. Each cancellation felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she'd tried to take. And then I started drafting the letter. I kept it short, brutal, and to the point. No begging, no apologies, no explanations. Just the truth she couldn't deny and the consequences she couldn't escape. When I was done, I left it on the kitchen counter where I knew she'd find it in the morning. I didn't wait for her reaction. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. This wasn't an ending, it was the beginning of something she'd never see coming. When I woke up the next morning in a cheap motel on the edge of town, I felt a strange mix of clarity and rage. Clarity, because I knew I was finally taking control of a situation I had ignored for far too long. Rage, because even after everything, part of me still wanted to confront her again, to scream at her, to demand why I wasn't enough for her. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I opened my laptop and started the next phase of my plan. First, I emailed the HR department at her company. It wasn't hard to find the name of the person in charge. Diana had mentioned her boss, Kelly, more than once, always with a mix of annoyance and fake flattery. In the email, I wrote just enough to spark curiosity. I'm reaching out because I believe Diana has been using company resources inappropriately. I have information that could impact the firm's reputation. Please contact me for details. I attached a screenshot of one of her texts to Aiden. Not the explicit ones, just enough to suggest she'd been using work hours for her little rendezvous. I knew Kelly well enough from Diana's complaints to guess she'd be curious enough to dig further. Next, I called the venue where we'd booked the deposit-heavy anniversary dinner she had demanded months ago. Hi, I said, keeping my tone calm. We won't be able to make it. Unfortunately, my wife has decided to celebrate with someone else. The woman on the other end stammered an apology, but I didn't care. The deposit was lost, but the message was priceless. Then, I reached out to our mutual friends. Not all of them, just the ones who mattered. In a carefully worded text, I let them know I was stepping away from our marriage and hinted at infidelity. I didn't name names or give details. I wanted them to wonder, to ask Diana questions she wouldn't be prepared to answer. By the time I checked out of the motel, I felt more in control than I had in months. That control was tested the moment I got a notification from our shared account. Diana had tried to withdraw $2,000. The transaction was declined. I smiled, imagining the look on her face when she realized the money was gone. I had left her just enough to cover essentials, but the rest was safely in an account under my name. I didn't take everything, just enough to remind her that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed, and I saw her name flash across the screen. For a moment, I debated answering. But I let it ring, savoring the power shift. Minutes later, she texted. Where the hell are you? What's going on with the accounts? Call me now. I ignored it and drove to my lawyer's office. By the time I left, the divorce papers were drafted, ready to be filed. I'd even included a clause to protect myself from any debts she might rack up before we were officially done. It wasn't just about the money or the legalities. It was about taking back control. About showing her that I wasn't the weak, predictable husband she thought I was. Later that evening, as I sat in a quiet diner with a cup of coffee, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Diana. "You're overreacting. This is ridiculous. Come home, and we can talk like adults." She still didn't get it. I typed a single response and hit send. I left a letter on the counter. "Read it. Then decide if you still want to talk." I could almost picture her storming into the kitchen, grabbing the letter, and reading the words I had so carefully chosen. "Diana, I know about Aiden. I know about the lies, the nights you thought I wouldn't notice, the plans you made without me. You wanted space. You've got it. Don't bother looking for me. I've already found what you'll never have again, freedom." This time, the silence was mine to enjoy. The texts and calls stopped after my message about the letter. I imagined her sitting in the kitchen, staring at the note, her mind racing to figure out what I knew and what my next move would be. It was quiet for 2 days. Quiet and surreal. For the first time in years, I wasn't tiptoeing around her moods, wasn't holding back my feelings to keep the peace. The silence wasn't just comforting, it was empowering. Then, on the 3rd day, she showed up. I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop, checking emails, when I saw her storming across the parking lot. She was still wearing the same expensive coat I had bought her last Christmas, the one she'd gushed over before throwing it into a pile of old stuff weeks later. Her face was a perfect mix of fury and desperation, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She spotted me and made a beeline for the car, yanking the passenger door handle. It was locked. I didn't move to unlock it. "Open the door, Alex," she shouted, her voice muffled by the glass. I lowered the window just enough to speak. "What do you want, Diana?" "What do I?" She threw up her hands, laughing bitterly. "What the hell do you think I want? To talk. You disappear for 3 days, drain the accounts, leave some cryptic letter, and now you're acting like I'm the crazy one?" I stared at her, unimpressed. "You are the crazy one if you think I'm just going to roll over and let you play the victim here." Her jaw tightened, the veneer of composure slipping. "This isn't funny, Alex. Do you know how humiliating it's been? Kelly called me into her office yesterday because of that email. She thinks I've been misusing company time." "Have you?" I asked, deadpan. Her eyes narrowed. "What did you tell her?" "Only the truth," I replied. "But if you're worried, maybe you should have spent more time on your actual job and less time sneaking around with Aiden." The color drained from her face. There it was, the reaction I'd been waiting for. The cracks in her armor. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she snapped, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think." "Oh." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Then what is it, Diana? Enlighten me." She hesitated, searching for the right angle to play. "He's just a friend. Someone I talk to when you're too checked out to care about me." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "A friend? That's funny. Friends usually don't send texts about how they couldn't keep their hands off you." Her expression shifted, the desperation giving way to anger. "You're being ridiculous. Do you even hear yourself? Snooping through my phone, sabotaging my job, stealing our money." "Our money?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "That's rich, coming from someone who spent years taking without giving anything in return. You think I didn't notice how you've been treating me? Like I'm just some placeholder in your life until something better came along." Her eyes flared, and for a moment, I thought she might slap me. But instead, she stepped back, composing herself. When she spoke again, her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You're pathetic, Alex. This little tantrum of yours. It's not going to change anything. You'll come crawling back, just like you always do. Because you're too weak to live without me." I unlocked the door and stepped out of the car, standing toe-to-toe with her. "Weak? Let me tell you something, Diana. For years, I put up with your lies, your manipulation, your contempt. But I'm done being your doormat. You wanted freedom. You've got it. But don't think for a second you'll find someone who'll put up with half of what I did. For the first time, she didn't have a response. She just stood there, her carefully crafted mask slipping as the weight of my words hit her. I got back in the car and rolled up the window, leaving her standing in the parking lot. As I drove away, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. But I felt something I hadn't felt in years, free. And I knew that whatever came next, it was on my terms, not hers. The next few days were a strange mix of chaos and quiet. Diana's silence was louder than any words she could have shouted at me. I knew she was plotting, trying to figure out her next move. That's how she worked, always calculating, always waiting for the perfect moment to turn the tables. But this time, I wasn't waiting for her. I was steps ahead. On the fourth day, I got a text from one of our mutual friends, Karen. She was one of the few people who had always been on my side, though she'd never said it outright. The message was short but packed with implications. You need to see this. Call me. I dialed her immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. Karen didn't waste time with pleasantries. She's talking, Alex, Karen said, her voice tense. She's been telling everyone you're unstable, that you drained the accounts out of spite. She's even saying you've been controlling her for years. I clenched my jaw, the anger simmering just below the surface. Of course she is. What else? She mentioned Aiden, Karen continued, hesitating for a moment. But she's spinning it like he's just a friend who's been helping her deal with your emotional abuse. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Diana was a master manipulator, and she knew exactly how to twist the narrative to make herself look like the victim. She's trying to turn people against me, I said, more to myself than to Karen. Karen sighed. Not everyone's buying it. A lot of us know what she's like. But you need to be careful, Alex. She's not going to go down without a fight. Thanks for the heads up, I said, hanging up before she could offer more advice. I wasn't surprised by Diana's tactics. If anything, I'd been waiting for it. But knowing she was dragging my name through the mud didn't make it any easier to stomach. That evening, I got another text, this time from an unknown number. You should check her Instagram. She's not as quiet as she seems. I opened the app, unsure what to expect. Diana had always been meticulous about curating her online persona, posting carefully staged photos of our perfect life. But what I saw now was something else entirely. There she was, smiling for the camera, her arm casually draped around Aiden's shoulders. The caption read, New Beginnings 2 Hearts #freedom #self-care. The rage hit me like a tidal wave. She wasn't just cheating, she was flaunting it. Publicly. Shamelessly. But as the initial shock wore off, I realized something. She just handed me the ammunition I needed. I saved the photo and screenshot the comments, noting every mutual friend who had liked or supported her post. Then I got to work. First, I emailed my lawyer, forwarding the screenshot along with a request to expedite the divorce proceedings. With that photo, there'd be no denying her infidelity, no room for her to spin her lies in court. Next, I crafted a message to those same mutual friends, the ones who had sided with her. I saw Diana's post. I hope you'll take a moment to consider the truth behind her so-called freedom. For years, I supported her, loved her, and gave her everything I had. And this is how she chose to repay me. If you're still in her corner after seeing this, that's on you. But I won't stay silent while she rewrites history. I sent it without hesitation, knowing it would stir the pot. The final piece of my plan came together when I contacted her boss, Kelly, again. This time, I attached the Instagram post, along with the time-stamped messages proving Diana had been meeting Aiden during work hours. I kept the email professional, stating that I was simply providing context for the concerns I'd raised earlier. By the time I closed my laptop, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I wasn't just reacting to her games, I was dismantling them, piece by piece. The next morning, I woke to chaos. My phone was flooded with messages from friends, family, and even Diana herself. You're ruining my life, Alex. How dare you share my private business? You're nothing but a bitter, pathetic man. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sat back and watched as the house of cards she'd so carefully built began to collapse. By the time the dust began to settle, Diana's carefully crafted world was in shambles. I could feel the shift in the air, the way people who once bought into her lies started to question her narrative. Karen texted me again, this time with a screenshot of a group chat. Diana's name was at the top, followed by an avalanche of messages from people we both knew. Diana, is this true? What's going on with you and Aiden? I thought you said Alex was the problem. You owe us an explanation. This looks bad. I imagined her sitting in her apartment, or maybe it was Aiden's by now, staring at her phone, scrambling to regain control. She had always thrived on appearances, on keeping the illusion of perfection intact. Now, her mask was cracking, and everyone could see the mess underneath. But I wasn't done. The following afternoon, my lawyer called with good news. Diana had officially been served with the divorce papers. Her reaction was animated, he said, a touch of amusement in his voice. I'd suggest steering clear of her for the time being. I couldn't help but smile. Animated? That was lawyer speak for furious. Later that day, I received an unexpected email from Kelly. It was brief, professional, but carried the weight of a subtle victory. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We have conducted a thorough review and taken appropriate action regarding Diana's behavior. Please do not hesitate to reach out if there are further concerns. I knew what that meant, she was done at her job. Diana had burned her bridges, and Kelly had no reason to keep her around. It was the kind of poetic justice that almost felt too perfect. Almost. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table in my temporary apartment, sipping a glass of whiskey, my phone buzzed. Diana's name lit up the screen, accompanied by a photo of her standing outside the building. I need to talk to you. Please, Alex. For a moment, I considered ignoring her. Letting her twist in the wind, just as she had done to me. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe, compelled me to answer. Why are you here, Diana? I said as I stepped outside, keeping the door propped open behind me. She looked different. Not the polished, confident woman I had married, but someone frayed at the edges. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes puffy as if she'd been crying. You didn't have to do all of this, she said, her voice shaking. The accounts, the email to my boss, the public humiliation. You went too far. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Too far. That's rich, coming from you. You didn't think it was too far when you lied to me, betrayed me, and flaunted it for the world to see. She flinched, but I didn't let up. I gave you everything, Diana. I supported you, trusted you. And you threw it all away for what? A few cheap thrills with someone who'll get bored of you the moment things get hard. Her composure cracked, and she sank to her knees, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. I'm sorry, Alex, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I messed up. I know I did. But I can fix this. We can fix this. Please, just give me another chance. The sight of her begging should have stirred something in me, anger, satisfaction, maybe even pity. But all I felt was emptiness. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice calm but firm. This isn't about fixing anything. You destroyed it, Diana. And now you have to live with the consequences. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't move. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Go home, I said. Whatever home you've made for yourself now. Because this one. It doesn't exist anymore. For the first time, she looked truly defeated. Her tears slowed, her hands trembling as she stood and wiped her face. This isn't over, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You'll regret this, Alex. Maybe, I replied, holding her gaze. But at least I'll have my self-respect. Can you say the same? She stared at me for a long moment, her expression shifting from desperation to something darker. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, the weight of everything settling over me like a storm that had finally passed. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. The war was over. And I had one. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. No tension in my chest, no knot in my stomach. The fallout was still unfolding, but for once, it didn't feel like my burden to carry. Diana had been quiet since her dramatic appearance the night before. I'd half expected another round of texts or calls, but there was nothing. No desperate pleas, no fiery accusations. Just silence. I couldn't tell if she was regrouping or if she'd finally accepted that the game was over. Either way, it didn't matter. I had reclaimed my life, and there was no going back. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Karen. She's making her move. Check Aiden's page. Curious, I opened Instagram and searched for his account. Aiden's profile wasn't private, which wasn't surprising. The guy had always struck me as the type who thrived on attention. The most recent post was a photo of him and Diana, both smiling, arms around each other, standing in front of what looked like a generic chain restaurant. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to let go of the past to embrace a better future. #new chapter #unapologetic." The comment section was a mix of congratulations and subtle shade. "You two look great together. New chapter. What happened to the old one? Better future. Hope it's worth the price." I smirked. It was almost comical how transparent they were. Diana was trying to rewrite the story, positioning herself as the heroine who had escaped a loveless marriage. But anyone with half a brain could see the cracks in her facade. Karen called me shortly after. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. "There's no plan," I said. "She's already doing the work for me." Karen laughed. "You're not wrong. A lot of people are starting to see through her." That post didn't help. We chatted for a bit longer, and by the time we hung up, I felt more confident than ever. The truth had a way of coming to the surface, no matter how hard Diana tried to bury it. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer. "It's official," he said. "The divorce filing went through. She's been notified, and we've frozen any remaining joint assets until the settlement is finalized." I thanked him and hung up, leaning back in my chair. It was done. The paperwork, the finances, the mess, it was all being dismantled, piece by piece. That evening, I went for a drive, letting the cool night air clear my head. I didn't have a destination in mind, but it felt good to be moving, to feel like I was heading somewhere, even if it was just symbolic. As I pulled back into the driveway of my temporary place, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Kelly. "Alex, I thought you'd like to know that we've filled Diana's position. The decision was unanimous. Best of luck moving forward." I smiled. Diana's empire had crumbled faster than even I had anticipated. When I finally climbed into bed that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. It wasn't just about getting revenge or exposing Diana for who she really was. It was about knowing that I had taken back control of my life. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living in the shadow of someone else's manipulation. I was free. And I wasn't looking back. A week later, everything came to a head. Diana had been eerily quiet, which only made me more certain she was plotting her next move. Her silence wasn't an admission of defeat, it was a recalibration. When her call came that evening, I wasn't surprised. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. "Alex," she started, her voice shaky but calculated, like someone trying to find the right pitch to manipulate. "We need to talk. Face to face." "There's nothing left to talk about," I replied evenly. "Please," she insisted. "Just, meet me at the park. 30 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I cared about what she had to say, but because I wanted to see how far she'd sink. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench beneath the dim glow of a street lamp. She looked polished, like she'd spent hours preparing for this moment. But her eyes betrayed her, the confidence wasn't real. I approached slowly, keeping a safe emotional distance. "What do you want, Diana?" She stood, clutching her coat tightly around her. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought I wanted something else, someone else, but I was wrong. I raised an eyebrow. You're saying Aiden wasn't your Prince Charming after all? Her lip quivered. It's not like that. I realized what I lost. What we had. You and me. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And I want it back. I almost laughed. She'd spent months tearing me down, lying, cheating, and flaunting her so-called new chapter for the world to see. And now, when the fallout had left her with nothing, she expected me to pick up the pieces. Let me guess, I said. Things didn't work out with Aiden. Or maybe he realized you're not as shiny and perfect as you pretended to be. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly masked it with a pathetic attempt at sincerity. That's not fair. I made mistakes, Alex. But we can fix this. I can fix this. Just, give me another chance. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Another chance? After everything you've done? You don't want me, Diana. You want the safety net I used to be. The stability. The money. The life you threw away without a second thought. Tears streamed down her face, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. Please, she whispered, falling to her knees. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling, I'll. Stop, I said firmly, cutting her off. This isn't about fixing us. There is no us. You ended at the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you. She sobbed harder, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. I loved you, Diana, I said, my voice steady. I gave you everything I had, and you threw it away like it was nothing. You don't get to come back now that your perfect little fantasy has fallen apart. Her sobs turned to angry gasps. You're cruel, she spat, her mask slipping completely. You think you've won, but you'll never find someone like me again. I smiled. You're right. And that's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her on her knees in the cold, empty park. That was the last time I saw her. The divorce was finalized a month later. I moved to a new city, started fresh, and left the wreckage of our marriage behind. Diana's name became a distant memory, a ghost of a life I no longer recognized. Looking back, I realized that her betrayal wasn't the worst thing that had happened to me, it was the best. It forced me to see the truth, to reclaim my worth, and to build a life that was truly mine. She thought I'd regret losing her. But all I felt was freedom.